So, welcome everyone. My name is Richard Capone. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Let's Go Learn, and today's webinar, Behavior Evaluation and Monitoring. We're real excited to be talking to you about this topic. We've been talking about behavior for the past couple of years, right, Amy? And
Exactly.
it's an exciting topic. There's lots happening in the area. Now, today, Amy and myself will be presenting. As I mentioned, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Let's Go Learn. Amy Dupree is the Director of Partnership Success, and she has a wealth of experience. She's a past special education EC director. She's a past principal. She's a past teacher. She has so much experience in implementing behavior solutions at a district level. And so she's going to be the brains in today's presentation. Um, Now, what I'm really excited about too is that today we are going to be covering and showing our technology component that's supporting behavior for the first time. And so it's going to be real exciting. Now, the webinar is very action-packed today, 30 minutes, probably about 10 minutes of slides, 15 minutes of talking, and then we have space for Q&A. So you can put your questions into the question box and we'll answer them at the very end. Okay, so just a little quick background on Let's Go Learn. So I did found the company with Dr. McCollum in 2000, and we launched our first product in 2001. So our first product was a reading assessment that ran over a modem. And so we are experts in technology and we're experts in diagnostic assessment. So that's sort of our core product was diagnostic assessment and reading and math plus instruction. And that's why we're so big in the special education world. But our guiding principle was always, if we're going to build something, make sure it informs instruction, make sure it helps, make sure it answers why, right? It's got to be useful. We don't want to do what everyone else is doing, which is just telling you whether students are above, at, or below. We want to really inform. And so that's our guiding principle, and that's guiding our behavior solution as well. So there's two things that sort of merged as we jumped into behavior is one, there's lots of piecemeal solutions out there, right? And part of that is just because behavior has sort of grown over time and then people have pieces in place. But sometimes it's you have to really start from scratch or you have to really revamp things. And so that's sort of the first problem we see. The second thing is that good data is very limited. There's not a lot of good data out there because sometimes it's hard to track behavior. It's on a sticky note or it's on a referral paper that doesn't quite always make it to the office maybe. So what we're trying to do is really bring it all together, right? We're taking our academic platform, which is the core, right? Which means we know how to roster, we know how to do customer service, we know how to support academics, special education. And then now we're adding a technology piece, which is going to be a core site survey. So how do you make sure your sites are trained? How do you make sure they are using the right vocabulary? How do we know that they know how to handle behavior framework? Then it's the student monitoring. So you have a constant, steady stream of data. You're up to date. You can make informed decisions. And then, of course, the professional development. So that's sort of what we're building, or I shouldn't say sort of, it's what we've built. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Okay. So, Amy and team, they've done four national conferences across the country, and it's always amazed us because when we held these conferences, there was so much pent-up demand for it. People were willing to send their entire teams for 2.5 days to learn about behavior. And so I want to just first, have Amy sort of talk about this whole framework that we're doing, and also out of that, Amy and team have worked with many districts across the country over the past couple of years, training them. So I do feel like the PD and the whole building is really absolutely one of the most important parts of it. Technology is important, but if you don't have a system in place, it's not going to work. So Amy, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, Amy Adams, who is my behavior partner here at Let's Go Learn, we are the Amy's. We have had the privilege of being around the country this past year talking about behavior and some things that really come to mind when we have worked with teams coast to coast is that behavior is an issue. It's often a barrier to student learning. And so it doesn't matter where you are, what type of school, a large district, a small district, behavior is a problem. It becomes a barrier. And so one of the things that we truly focus on is how do we look at the systems that are within a district or within a school that support students' behavior shifts? And how do we make sure that we're providing the right intervention with the right progress monitoring and the right tools for teachers to provide the right interventions for students? Because we want to meet students where we are. We do it a lot with academics really well. We support, as a profession, education's really good at looking if a student can't read, what do we do? If a student can't do their multiplication facts, what do we do? That's not necessarily the case for behavior. So one of the things that Amy and I truly focus on is that professional development component through a tiered system. So just like we look at academics through tiered systems, we do the same thing with behavior. And we try to hold those same tenets in place. So we want to have globally success for students behaviorally at core, where 80% are responding appropriately. We want to, again, look at that tier two supplemental, those clusters of students who need a little bit more support. And then individually, we want to look at tier three for those students who also need that intensive support. So we want to keep the behavior side of the triangle aligned with the academic side. And I think sometimes that's paradigm shifts for folks. And I think it becomes new learning. And that's where Amy and I really dig in, because everybody's also got things that they're doing well, just like Richard said. You may have processes that are there, but how do we then operationalize that? And Richard, if you don't mind, just one more click would bring up some key terms.
Oh,
So
thank you.
one of the things that we really look at when we talk about operationalizing is looking that we have all the components and systems determined, and not just in core, but like in tier two and in tier three, determining every single aspect of what's going to happen at a district level and at a building level. And then how do we teach that? How do we communicate that? That's a process. It's a process to teach that to staff. It's a process to teach it to students and parents. And then implementation. And that is really where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. That is that data collection piece where data really begins to speak to what's happening in a building. And we have a core behavior assessment tool that we use to look at what's happening within a building and where the strengths and weaknesses are within those systems. And then we have our behavior tool on our platform side, which Richard's going to demonstrate here in just a little bit and give you sort of a taste of that, that collects that student data. Because it's the teacher data, the building data, and the student data that interact to kind of give that larger picture of what's happening well. And then Amy and I also train in tier two with some of those additional pieces of engaging staff and making some database decisions and really analyzing our interventions, and then looking at those kiddos at tier three and reviewing all of their data, and then considering like next steps and what more do we need to do. So when we train across the country, we help people take what they do already and turn it into that data-based, data-driven, data decision-making process. And I think that's key. And that's what LGL's aiming for with our beam.
And the thing about it too is that the data we collect is really sort of universal, right? I mean, it could apply to a lot of different
Mhm.
models. And I know
Exactly.
we'll talk about it a little bit how it's flexible, but that's the whole point, right? The data helps support because you may work with someone and they say, hey, this is our process, but it requires this paper-based survey to be filled out, and then people don't fill it out, right? And then the process will break down. So our goal is to sort of make that technology support
Mhm.
the process that they want to implement.
Yeah, we really want to meet you where you are. Take what you're already doing well and capitalize on that, and then expand it to be really rich and data-driven, just like we do with academics.
And it's sort of interesting too because I'm actually in the West Coast and Amy's on the East Coast. But I know you've traveled back and forth with different customers. But I also think it's interesting how the language sometimes is really different, right? People have different perceptions of behavior, and that sometimes leads to I would say sometimes some failed implementation or weaker implementations because they don't think about it as comprehensively as you guys do. I feel like it's been pretty interesting. I've learned a lot just seeing how you guys are working with different customers.
Yeah, I think sometimes we get in habits of sending kids to the office, let's say, as the punishment or the outcome or the driver behind poor behavior, just get out of the classroom. But that doesn't really change the behavior. Again, we want to really look at behavior change. Maladaptive behavior needs intervention and it needs instruction, exactly as academics do. So we want to really focus on ensuring that we're meeting kids where they are. And again, it comes back to what systems are working well and what systems aren't. And your data's going to tell you that. Like disproportionality actually could become an issue if you don't have those strong processes in place. So whether you call it NTSS or RTI or just tiered systems, it's all the same as far as how you want to respond core and then at a supplemental level and an intensive level.
All right, that's great. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump into the system, and I think sometimes as I jump into the system, things become a little bit clearer. So again, the goal that we really had with this is to make sure we have a system that was really flexible and easy to use and able to collect data. So actually, the screenshot I showed right there that has some screenshots. Those are actually live screenshots of the app. So we have an app for data collection. So the one of the things we said is, look, you can't be collecting data based on sticky notes, based on filling out a form. Like if you're in the cafeteria, you can't go back and get a form suddenly and say, oh, I need to fill out this information on something that happened, right? So there's expected and unexpected behavior, incidents that come up. And so the idea is the phone sort of guides you through it. It says, okay, the teacher can click. Now, right now, these are just screenshots, but if I'm actually in the system, I can also use a computer, right? So whether someone's using a computer to log something or whether they're using the mobile phone, we don't care, right? But it's going to be really easy. So initially, when you come up here, someone says, okay, I'm going to go ahead and log an expected behavior. Right here, it comes down. You can select the student. You can go ahead and select the setting, right here. And now what's sort of interesting about this is what I'm doing right now is not rocket science. This is a process that's already defined. These lists and everything we have are actually customizable at the customer level. So you may say, well, we don't have a cafeteria, or we call it something else, or we have different settings, right? So that is all customizable at the client level. So one of the things we did was, and when Amy and Angela were all developing this, they said it has to be flexible because in order for our system to work, we need to be able to, select it based on what the process the customer is using. So that's what it is. So this is really simple. Now, also, if you're on the cell phone and you get interrupted, you don't quite finish it, you hit save for later. If you did finish it, you hit submit, right? So again, being real simple. I come over here for an incident, minor, major. Again, this is a little bit more um, structured based on best practices, right? So I can go ahead toggle between it. And again, same thing. I have these pick lists of things I can choose: antecedent, offenses, arrangements, consequences, and you can add narratives. And again, you could go ahead and put save for later or submit. So this process, it's supposed to be really simple. Again, I could do it on a mobile phone. I could do it on my computer. It doesn't matter. Now, once the data is in, right? First part, of course, is good data, right? So that's absolutely 100%. This process has to be solid, and I feel like we've nailed it down. The next part is going to be dashboards. So at this point, I don't really want to go too much into detail, but the idea is the dashboard will be customizable to who you are and what you do, right? So Amy, I'm going to bungle some of these terms and roles, but if you're on the behavior team and you're looking at incidents as a site leader, you're going to need a different dashboard than a teacher or principal, right?
Yes. So our teachers will have dashboards that are just relative to the incidents that are logged for the students who are assigned to them in their classrooms. But our administrators and then our district administrators will have a different lens so that they can, at least if you're a principal, look at what's happening in your building, monitor students who are at a tier 2 or a tier 3 level. And then your district administration would be able to see that by school. Additionally, your problem solving teams will also have the capacity to then come in and look at student behaviors and start tracking those intervention data, keeping up with progress monitoring data, and looking at students through the tiers as well. Again, to sort of help make those decisions that are school wide. And as I said earlier, we have a core behavior assessment tool, which will also be part of this app. So your behavior problem solving team or your school improvement team would be able to go through the core behavior assessment tool 2 or 3 times a year to make sure that your staff and students are calibrated on the systems and expectations that you have. It is really a fabulous tool, I believe, for collecting student data and school data to drive decisions at a granular level.
Yeah, and there's more. I mean, like I said, I just showed the dashboard. There's also progress monitoring, if you want to look at specific students. Um, but also this stuff is also changing over time. One of the things I sort of see is the way technology is moving, it's really to be flexible, and the way we're building our newer systems and everything we're building nowadays is we're trying to build it more flexibly so that it could change based on your needs. No longer are people building these big monolith programs where it's like this is the way it is. Nowadays, it's about, hey, how do I give it to the way you want it? Just like when you go on your Google News or you go on your dashboard on a website, you could tweak things to yourself, right? We're doing the same thing. But I think one of the first things you guys will evaluate when you're talking to us potentially or working with us is, hey, are we able to collect the data that you aren't able to collect easily right now? Are we able to do the core surveys that maybe you're not doing? And then are we able to bring it together? Over time, this will evolve and we'll even get better at it as we work with you more long term. But I think the site survey, the core survey, I did not actually show you because that's actually it's more of a survey tool, but the data is integrated into our platform. That's sort of it in a broad nutshell. I mean, Amy, is there anything else you want me to show from a technology standpoint that you think might be interesting to point out? Otherwise, we can also, I think questions are starting to come in and we can take some questions.
I just believe that the point that you're making about being able to tailor some aspects of the behavior collection tool to districts, specifically their matrices, is important because we want to make it customizable to meet your needs. And the flexibility of that is really critical, I think, to addressing individual districts and schools.
Yeah, and actually, one other thing actually I'd like to point out too is we've always been about, remember I said the why, right? So from a behavior standpoint, I think a lot of the tools out there are sometimes geared more towards federal reporting. So they're talking about post-event, how many majors, how many minors we're doing, but they're not doing enough to be proactive, right? They're reactive. So I think what you guys have designed and help us come to fruition is a system that really can be proactive, right? If you do have your entire student body on the system, you can sort of spot things before they become a problem. So someone may not have a behavior intervention plan in place, right? But if they pop up on the list, you say, hey, how come these three students are popping up on the list? They're not even in a tier two or three, right? Actually, these are tier one students, right? So then that sort of really changes the game because I think, I like what you guys have said is that a strong if you have a strong core, it sort of eliminates sometimes these tier two and threes that pop up if you do it properly in core. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. We want to intervene with the correct intervention at the correct point in time for the student. And if you can always think of the things that we do academically and translating that to behavior, we want to look at the whole child and get those interventions in place timely.
Let's go ahead and take some questions. So I see some questions flowing up. So the first one is, can you roster an entire district? Do you work with Clever for rostering? Yeah, so absolutely. So as I said before, we're doing academic present level diagnostic in reading and math for special education departments. We've also test entire school districts. So yeah, we know how to do all that rostering, whether it's a spreadsheet, whether it's through Clever, whether it's through class, a link, whatever it may be, we do that. All right, next question is what type of data does Beam track? So I'll let you explain that, Amy.
Yeah, well, we have in there majors and minors. And so that is part of the PD that we help ensure that you have going on in your buildings, that you have a definition for majors and minors. We track those. It's that individual student incident. We also want to, though, track the positive behaviors that are happening in buildings, those expected behaviors, specifically for the kids who are in tier two and tier three, because we want to have reporting that shows that the trends of expected behaviors increasing for students and the negative behaviors decreasing. So we want to look at both sides of that.
All right, that's great. What is a site survey? How does that help a school?
Sure. So when we're tracking all of the student behavior, which is what Richard has shown you today, that is part of the equation, but it's often the adults in the building who are influencing some of those behaviors that get tracked and monitored. And so keeping some alignment within that building is what that core behavior assessment tool serves to do. And so that data also informs leaders, your problem solving team, your school administration, your district administration, as to where you might have some training needs for staff. But it is often the adult behavior that influences the behavior for the students. And so we want to make sure that we're not just looking at students, but also the adults.
So, Amy, that core site survey is sort of measuring your training and quality of implementation at the site level. It's sort of like a calibration, right? So if you really want to
Yes.
implement well, you need to make sure all your sites are calibrated and sort of operating at the same level.
It's an alignment tool. It
Mhm.
100% is. And so making sure that if you have needs at tier two for how to provide interventions and collect data appropriately, then those can be addressed with the resources that you have at your school and district level to make sure that we're not just responding to kind of those three alarm fires with behavior in schools, but that we're moving kids systematically through tiers like we would through an academic tier.
All right, great. All right, now we're getting a little nitty gritty. Are administrators able to interact with teacher submissions?
Yeah, absolutely. So you, as an administrator, you'll be able to look at what is crossing your dashboard. You'll be able to sort and filter by grade levels, by students, by teachers, and then by tiers. And so you'll be able to look at those global pictures of what's happening in your building at a glance and sort of have a touch point maybe weekly for a staff meeting or a team focus and look at those trends. I think we have a lot of trend data that will be available for you as a school administrator. And so if you see submissions that are concerning in any way, you'll be able to interact with that submission and speak with a teacher or a PLC team.
So the principal would have their own dashboard and they might say, they could even have to calibrate someone, right? They could say, well, this teacher is maybe being too sensitive or not sensitive enough. So maybe that allows them to
Exactly.
do that. That's interesting.
Mhm.
All right. So what does tier mean on the dashboard page? I think I showed one of those pages and it had tiers listed. And I think it showed a bunch of tier ones. What does that mean in our system?
Yeah, so when you have students who are successful at core, they're just going to be tier one kiddos where things are okay, and they may have every kid has a blip of a day occasionally, so they may have a few minor referrals for the entire year. But as referrals come in for minors, sometimes teachers begin to think that it's just that student and they don't pay attention to the number of referrals that have happened in a minor. So the problem solving team then would be alerted to students having a significant number of minors that maybe warrants a problem solving conversation, and it elevates that student to a team level, to an administrator level, to make sure that we are meeting that student with what they need at the time that they need it. And so those tiers can then be changed to tier two, indicating that now we're going to start providing additional intervention and support for that student. And those are team and admin decisions only. So teachers don't get to manipulate that.
Hmm,
It is more of a problem solving approach to make sure that we're looking at data with the appropriate lens.
that's awesome. Here's another question. We've tried to implement behavior solutions. We have implemented PBIS. We get a lot of resistance at the site level. What would you recommend we do to get buy-in? That's a long
Yeah.
question. It's
Yeah.
loaded.
Well, that's a multi-layered question. So everybody needs something at core, but PBIS alone does not solve a behavior problem. That is part of a core behavior system. But it's what do you do when PBIS doesn't work? And that's where those tiers two and tiers three come into play. And then what systems do you have to underpin teacher support and student need at the same time? And so PBIS is a component that a lot of schools use, but it is not the end all be all. You do have to have those additional layers of support, and that's truly where that professional development piece that Amy and I work with districts and schools comes into play? That's a
So the
great
way
question.
so the way you actually do it then, because I know you guys have met with multiple districts, you guys sort of come in there then and sometimes maybe do a presentation because the principals may not know what they don't know, right? So you may come in
Right.
there and sort of give them a basic like, hey, this is the framework and this is what it can do. And this is how easy, these are the steps we need to take. So maybe you make it more tangible. Is that what how they would maybe get buy-in across the sites?
Yeah, so we do have the core presentation that we do that goes through our core behavior assessment tool, and it helps schools kind of analyze what's happening in their building. And if PBIS is it, that's going to become glaringly obvious once you make it through the tool and understanding all of those additional components and layers. But when you come back then and train staff on that, that's where your student data then that gets input into this platform becomes more fidelity based, and it's more accurate as to the individual student. So it's a twofold system.
All right, that's great. Okay, so it looks, let's see if there's any more questions. Looks like we're looks like that's it. If anyone has any other questions, last minute question, go ahead and enter it into the chat. I did just put in a link. Uh, it's the link right here. So if you want to start a conversation with Amy and team or Angela or anyone else, just go ahead. You could either scan that QR code. You could also go ahead and click the link that I just put into the chat. Um, but you know, we are in it for the long haul. We realize that behavior is a complex topic. And it's going to be a combination of training, listening to you guys. It's also planning and it's also technology. I obviously, from my background, I'm a big believer in technology. I know sometimes when you have the right technology, it just makes implementation that much easier because otherwise, sometimes people feel like you're pulling teeth, right? If you make them have such an arduous process, they're like, I'm not going to fill out this paper thing every time I could do it. You know, I'm in the cafeteria and then I forget. You know, I don't remember. So that's why I'm saying the mobile phone I feel like is a really critical tool that we developed, and also the flexible database behind everything is really key too. I don't think very many systems allow you to change all your fields and your choices like we do. And that was one of our requirements in the very beginning. So all right, no other questions, Amy. So thank you so much. And thank you all of you. And we look forward to possibly working with you and supporting you.
Thank you.